Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm talking about all the horror books I read in May. So this month I read 4 books. I just wasn't really in a reading mood this month, but I did read some interesting books. I read a manga, Junji Ito, and I really enjoyed that. I read a new release that's coming out in September 2021, and I read a novella and another monster book. Let's get into it, shall we? The first book I read was The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong. I was sent this ARC copy, advanced reader copy from Tor Nightfire because this book doesn't come out till September, and I was super excited about that because I had this book on my TBR. I had it on my TBR from a while ago when Stephen King blurbed it, and I believe his son Joe Hill blurbed it too, and they basically hyped it up. So this story, I would say, is a psychological horror, more on the thriller side. It's about a house that has a few interesting occupants in it, and we get to read from different perspectives within the house. One is from a man who is really peculiar, and we don't know a lot about who he really is and what his motives are, and he has a teenage daughter who's not allowed to leave outside. And you also read from the perspective of a cat, which was really interesting. The cat also cannot leave. And there's also another perspective of a girl who's looking for her long-lost sister, or her sister who was kidnapped years prior. So this book was a really interesting read because there's the different perspectives, and I wasn't used to reading from the perspective of a cat, so I thought that was really unique. And the story is really about trauma and abuse and how individuals deal with trauma and get through it. It's very suspenseful and it's ominous. Like, I was on the edge of my seat trying to figure out who this guy is in this house and who all these people are, and why am I reading from a cat's perspective. That was honestly the most unique part for me, was the cat's POV. I think that the prose is beautiful, and I found that the characters were very nuanced and complex. And I found the premise to be very twisty and psychological. I didn't know where it was going, and then at a certain point I kind of figured it out, so it got a little predictable in certain ways, but it was still an enjoyable read. I just was confused at certain moments, and I'm not really sure what happened towards the end, but it was an interesting reveal. I don't want to say too much. I enjoyed the book, but I didn't love it. But I do think that this was a very unique premise, and I do want to read more from this author. I think she writes beautifully, and I'm so grateful I got to read an advanced copy. Thank you so much to Tor Nightfire for sending this to me, and I think you should definitely check this out. It comes out September 2021, which is almost close. It's almost right around the corner. Halloween will be here before you know it, folks. Alright, so next I read one of my most anticipated books, and this is Near the Bone by Christina Henry. It's about a young woman who is living on a mountain with her abusive husband, and she discovers that they may not be alone, and she thinks that there's a monster lurking in the mountains. This book was really good. It pulled me in. It was so gripping in the beginning. The first half, I loved it. The atmosphere, I love the setting. I felt so much pain for the main character, who is really in the worst relationship ever. It is the most abusive relationship a person can be in. You get to really hear her inner dialogue, and she doesn't really know. The character is really trying to figure out who she really is, because she doesn't remember a lot from her past, and she's also trying to deal with 2 monsters, her abusive husband and this unknown creature that's in the mountains. And it was gruesome at times. And then about halfway point, there's an introduction of some characters who I didn't really like, and I kind of slowed down halfway point for me, and it became repetitive. I mean, you get a little bit more about the character. I appreciate learning about the character's backstory. She has an interesting backstory, and I wanted to know more, but I didn't like the characters that were introduced, and I feel like their responses to certain things were unbelievable. Like, for example, a human heart is like thrown through the window, or it shows up outside their window and they're just like, what do you want for breakfast? Like, stuff like that. They didn't really react in a way that I would expect somebody to react when they see a totally gruesome scene outside their cabin. So I didn't like where it went in the end, but I loved the whole first half. I loved the atmosphere, and this book kind of doesn't really give you answers. The first half I loved. I do think it's a great read. I am super interested in reading more from Christina Henry because I think she has an interesting way with words. She's coming out with a Sleepy Hollow book in the fall, I believe, and I think it's called Headless Horseman, and I am obsessed with Sleepy Hollow. Like, you don't even understand. I have a whole Sleepy Hollow Headless Horseman shrine that you cannot see right now, and I've gone to Sleepy Hollow. I just gotta show you him because he's gotta. Okay, thank you. I'm very excited for that. I've asked the publisher to send me an ARC, so fingers crossed that I get that because I really want to read it. Next, I picked up Tomie from Junji Ito. This is a thick boy. It's like 700 pages, and I'm so proud of myself for reading it. It's my second manga I've ever read. The first was Uzumaki, which I loved, and just like Uzumaki, this one is filled with horrifying artwork and a terrifying story. So the story follows a young girl named Tomie who is kind of like a femme fatale. She's beautiful. Everyone like is immediately drawn to her, and she is murdered by her classmates, and they chop her up and they throw her pieces wherever, and then she comes back. And each story follows this one character as she regenerates and comes back to life, and she kind of torments a variety of men who fall for her. And there's just some of the stories stand out more than the others to me. Like, there's one that's set in a hospital, and one character is going down into Barlow, stop looking at my feet! He's looking at my feet again! So there's a character who goes down into the basement, and it's so eerie, and I was on edge for that. Like, Junji Ito has a way of creating such a terrifying atmosphere, and you can't wait to turn the page, but you're also terrified. You don't know what you're gonna see because the artwork is disturbing, and it's filled with body horror, some pretty dark imagery. So definitely look up some trigger warnings for this because it's basically reading 700 pages of a woman being murdered. I don't know if I liked it as much as Uzumaki. That one freaked me out, but I am definitely a Junji Ito fan, and I want to read more from him. I also picked up another one called Fragments of Horror, which is another collection of short stories. So I've already started reading that one, and it's creepy as fuck, as most of his work seems to be. So yeah, I do recommend that. I think, obviously, I feel like Junji Ito is super popular and people know who he is, but if you haven't read any manga and you're kind of intimidated by it, like I was before I read Uzumaki, don't be intimidated. It's not that hard. I was super worried because you have to read right to left, which threw me off, and I'm not a huge comic book reader to begin with, so, but I got used to it, and I'm glad I did, and I'm glad I picked these up because I love them. So, and the last book I read was The Worm and His Kings by Haley Piper, and it is about a young woman who dives into some weird shit. She is searching for her missing girlfriend, and she believes she's been taken to the tunnels underground. And I believe it's New York City, 1990. Yes, New York City, 1990. And she goes into the tunnels and she unearths more than she bargained for. And she learns about this cult that worships this worm, and things just elevate and get crazier and out of this world. This is definitely, it's described as a cosmic horror, and yeah, it was. So I really like the setup. I love the subterranean aspect. I love subterranean horror. So the fact that it was set underground and with all these interesting characters who are definitely, they're a cult. So I love cults also. I just loved that setup. I loved her investigating. She is a trans woman and she experienced a traumatic event, and you learn about that throughout the story. I'm not a huge fan of cosmic horror, and it's not that I don't like it, it's just that I feel like sometimes it just goes over my head. It's like too complex for me, and it's hard for me to connect with. I haven't read Lovecraft, I haven't read a ton of cosmic horror, so this was kind of new for me, and it's definitely cosmic horror. I didn't know what was going on sometimes. It got really confusing at sometimes, but I love the whole idea. It got too cosmic for me, for my taste, but if you're into cosmic horror, you'll love this. And there you have it. That is everything I read in May. What did you read? Let me know down below. Have you read any of the books I talked about? And I'll leave all my social links down below so we can connect on there and become spooky besties and talk about spooky shit. And I'll catch you next time, guys. Thanks for watching.